Which is better, the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro 5G or the T-Mobile Revvl 6 5G? Well, in this video, we're going to find out. What's going on, everyone? This is Kevin here, and these are the two most latest up-to-date Revvl devices from T-Mobile. Now, both of these phones are being sold at both regular T-Mobile and Metro T-Mobile as well. And with the Revvl 6 Pro 5G, we have an MSRP of $219, and then with the regular Revvl 6 5G, we have an MSRP of $169. So both of these phones are definitely affordable budget options. Now, I've been covering the Revvl devices from T-Mobile for several years now, and every generation does sell very well at those carriers, and I'm definitely expecting these two phones to also be a success. Now, they do share quite a bit in common, but at the same time, there are a variety of differences, and I'm definitely looking forward to going over all of that throughout this video. Now, the first difference definitely has to be the displays that we're getting here with these devices. So with the Revvl 6 Pro 5G, we have a 6.82-inch display compared to a slightly smaller 6.5-inch display with the Revvl 6 5G. And you can see when holding these two phones up side by side, the Revvl 6 Pro 5G certainly is the larger phone of the two. That being said though, both phones are relatively large, especially compared to smaller phones with smaller displays. Now with both of these devices, we are getting LCD displays. They're also both 720p. However, with the Revvl 6 Pro 5G, we have a PPI of 263 compared to a PPI of 270 with the regular. And then also, the Pro model features a 20.5:9 aspect ratio compared to a slightly shorter 20:9 aspect ratio with the regular model of the device. Now with both of these phones, we are getting very large display panels here, which do make them ideal for content consumption. So whether that's reading an ebook, or reading an article online, or going on social media, or watching video content, you're gonna have a great experience by having such large canvases here with these devices. Now looking at the front panels of these phones, they're pretty similar overall as far as the form factor goes. Both phones do have water drop notches, and in those notches are the front-facing cameras. Now with the Pro model, we have a 16 megapixel front-facing camera compared to a 5 megapixel front-facing camera with the regular. And then with both of these devices, we do have thicker bottom bezels. Now the storage configurations with these phones are very different. So with the Pro model, we have 128 gigabytes of storage, and then with the regular model, we have half of that at 64 gigabytes. Now both of these phones do support micro SD card expansion, so if you do want to offload photos and videos, for example, that certainly is possible, so that you'll be able to free up some of that internal space. But overall, I feel like for both of these devices, we are getting a lot of internal storage, especially considering that these are meant to be budget phones. So I can't imagine really with either of them that you'll probably end up filling up the internal space, just because they really have packed in a lot of value here by giving us a lot of space to begin with. Now, as far as wireless charging goes, we actually do have wireless charging with the Revvl 6 Pro 5G, but unfortunately there is no wireless charging with the regular model. And then both phones do feature fingerprint sensors on the sides of the devices on the power buttons. Let's give that a try first here with the Pro model. So you can see, there we go, it works really well. Let's try that one more time. It's very fast and responsive there. And then with the regular model here, we'll try out the fingerprint sensor. And it's also very fast, so you can see it does work very well. Now, in addition to having the fingerprint sensors, we're also getting face unlock with these devices, so I do appreciate that we do have multiple methods for accessing them. Now, another major difference between these two phones definitely has to be the cameras that we're getting. So with the Revvl 6 Pro 5G, we're getting a quad camera setup with a 50 megapixel main camera, a 5 megapixel ultra wide angle camera, a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera for portrait mode, and a 2 megapixel macro camera for close-up images. And then with the regular Revvl 6 5G, we have a 13 megapixel main camera, a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera, and then a 2 megapixel macro camera. So the biggest difference is that we're not getting an ultra wide angle camera with the regular model. So you will have to go for the Pro model if you do want to have that feature. Now here's how things look on the camera apps on both devices. This is with the main camera. Then from here, at least on the Pro model, we can switch over to the ultra wide angle camera, so we can fit a lot more content into the frame. Now, I'm personally a big fan of the ultra wide camera, and with any phone that does have it, I do tend to actually use it quite a bit, so it's certainly not a gimmick. And especially when I'm traveling, I like to use the ultra wide camera because there might be a large building I want to take a photo of, or also if I'm taking a picture of scenery and I want to fit a lot of my surroundings into a single frame, it definitely comes in handy for that. and just a cool way to kind of change up the photos that you are taking. Now, is it a deal breaker that there is no ultra wide angle camera with the Revvl 6 5G? I don't know. It really depends on what you're looking for. I know if you are somebody that tends to take a lot of different photos with your devices and it's a major part of how you use your phone, then it might be worth spending the extra money and getting the ultra wide camera. But if you are someone that barely takes any photos ever with your phone, then I suppose that feature probably isn't even that relevant to you. Now, heading over to the More tab on both of these devices, we can access the macro cameras, and with that, we can get very close up here and have things be in really good detail. So that's a great feature, certainly comes in handy in certain situations. We can also go to live focus mode to do portrait mode with the rear cameras, so that's great. Except there is one major downside with both of these devices, and I found this to be very surprising. Neither of these two phones have portrait mode for the front-facing cameras. Now, the good news is the front cameras do have some pretty good quality. So if you want to take a nice looking selfie, I think you can definitely do that with either of these two phones. But if you want to take a portrait mode selfie, you can't do that. So on pretty much every other device that I've covered, including phones that are more affordable than even these, you would then go from the front-facing camera to go to live focus, which sometimes is called portrait mode as well. But you can see when I do that, it just flips things over to the rear camera. So there is no front-facing portrait mode to be found here. And for me at least, that is a deal breaker. That's a feature that I use all the time. So keep that in mind. If that's something that's important to you, just know that you're not getting that here with either of these two phones. And I'm certainly hoping that that's a feature that they can somehow enable in a software update, as I feel like a lot of people are going to be disappointed if they end up getting these devices and then finding out that they can't actually take portrait mode front-facing pictures. Another thing to keep in mind as well is that neither of these two phones support 4K video recording. So if you do like to record video in 4K to put on your 4K TV, then just know that you can't do that here. But you do at least get 1080p as the recording resolution, and I know for many people that pretty much is adequate. Now, as far as RAM and processors go with these two phones, with the Pro model we have 6GB of RAM compared to 4GB of RAM with the regular model, and what's interesting is that we're actually getting the same processors with both of these devices. So they both feature the MediaTek Dimensity 700. Now with that processor, you're going to get some pretty solid kind of lower end mid-range performance, but in addition to that, as the names of these two phones do suggest, these devices do support 5G connectivity. Now at this point in 2022, I do think that you can get by without 5G, but at the same time, if you're going to go through all the time and effort of getting a brand new smartphone, you may as well get one that does support your carrier's latest and greatest network. So definitely something worth keeping in mind. Now as far as the actual performance of the processor that we're getting here with these phones goes, it's certainly adequate for phone calls, text messages, going on social media, watching video content, doing some light gaming as well. I feel like really you're just going to be frustrated if you're somebody that's constantly on your phone. Maybe that's a big part of your business, for example. If your smartphone is really a large part of your life and your lifestyle, then I can definitely see some frustrations potentially coming up with kind of the slowness of the processors that we're getting here. Again, they're not necessarily slow, but compared to a device that might be double or triple the price of these phones, you certainly will notice that you're getting what you're paying for. So keep that in mind. Definitely don't keep your expectations too high here with either of these two devices. Now I did run a benchmark test using Geekbench 5 with both of these phones, and I'll show you the scores from that test right now. But essentially you can see here, they're nearly the same. In fact, with the regular model, I actually got a higher multi-core score, but I would essentially consider this a tie. Now that certainly does make sense, as these phones do have the same processors, but at the same time, it looks like the additional RAM that we're getting with the Pro model doesn't really seem to help the benchmark scores here at all. Now, what I recommend doing is running this test on your current phone and then compare your scores to these scores to get a better idea of how these devices compare to what you currently have, because it certainly is possible that your current phone could be faster than these phones. Now, as far as battery capacity goes with these devices, we do have a 5,000 milliamp hour internal battery with the Pro model, and then a slightly smaller 4,500 milliamp hour internal battery with the regular model of the phone. So overall, definitely expect to get a full day of usage out of these devices, and maybe even a second half day as well. Now, another major difference is that we are getting NFC here with the Pro model, but no NFC with the regular model. And essentially with NFC, you can make mobile contactless payments using tap and pay. So if that's a feature that you like, then definitely go for the Pro model. And then both of these phones are running Android 12 out of the box. We're essentially getting a stock version of the software here. And I have no idea if these phones will ever get Android 13 or a newer version of Android. I don't believe that there's any sort of promise on the part of T-Mobile when it comes to that. But if you happen to know if they have plans for future updates to these devices, then definitely let me know in the comment section below, as I certainly am curious about that. But now that I've gone over a variety of different things regarding the Revvl 6 Pro 5G and the Revvl 6 5G, let's take a closer look at the hardware. Now overall, these phones are pretty similar when it comes to the hardware itself. They're both made completely of plastic, besides the displays which are glass, and they both have kind of this boxy look to them. Now taking a look at the left side of both devices, we have pretty much the same setup here with slots for the micro SD card and SIM card. Then on the right side of both phones, we have volume up, volume down, and also the power button, which doubles as the fingerprint sensor. And you can see that the power button on both phones does feature a nice T-Mobile magenta color there. Then up top here, we have noise canceling microphones in both devices. And then on the bottom of the two phones, we have 3.5mm headphone jacks, microphones, USB-C ports for charging and data transfer, and the speakers. So pretty much the same form factor overall with these devices. On the back of the two phones, you can see we have the camera modules and T-Mobile logo, and that's pretty much it. Now I do appreciate that these phones don't have a glossy back, as they certainly don't pick up nearly as many fingerprints as a phone that does, so I'm glad that they ended up going this route. That being said though, I would recommend pairing up either of these two phones with some sort of case, just because plastic does tend to get pretty scratched up as time goes on. But in conclusion, these two phones without a doubt are going to be a huge success for T-Mobile and Metro. I know they're going to sell really well because they have for previous generations. And a big part of that is, one, we're getting a lot of value here with these handsets. And two, they do tend to offer very generous promotions and deals on their T-Mobile branded devices. So I would imagine that most people that end up getting these phones probably will end up getting them for free. So that's typically how it ends up going, and that's great for consumers, and overall, I'm sure a lot of people will end up getting these. But most importantly, I'm really curious to know what you think. Without a doubt, the Pro model is better in every way than the regular model. There's really no reason to get the regular model if you can get the Pro model for the same price. Now, I can't imagine they will be the same price. That's why this phone is meant to be a little bit more of a premium option. But if you, for some reason, went to a carrier store and you found these two phones being offered for the same price, then there's no reason to go for the regular model. Definitely go for the Pro model. But this is Kevin here, coming at you with my comparison of the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro 5G versus the T-Mobile Revvl 6 5G. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, definitely give it a thumbs up, and I will see you in the next one.